Well, welcome back to the Bible Lounge. We're looking at creation today. And you might be mistaken in thinking that creation is just as simple and as basic as God made everything and that's it. But there's a bit more detail to be aware of. There's a lot more detail than what I'm covering here, but we'll cover some of the key aspects fairly briefly. So, first of all, we know that God made the world and everything that's in it. We see this from Genesis chapter 1, when all of creation, and chapter 2, when at the beginning of chapter 2 it says that he had completed everything in creation and rested. So there's no more special creation in that way after chapter 2. But particularly interested here in Genesis chapter 1 and the triune God, Father, Son, and Spirit involved in creation. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God saw that the light was good, as everything in his creation was good when he had finished it before the fall. And God separated the light from the darkness. There's a lot of separation involved in creation as you read Genesis chapter 1. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening and there was morning the first day. And then you have the other 5 days of creation and then a day of rest following that. So that's Father and Spirit. But where do we see the Son? Well, with the knowledge of the New Testament coming in, we have the Son appearing here where God said, "Let there be light." God spoke words. Ducking over to John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning was the Word. So the Word was there in the beginning. There's an exact parallel where the Word is God. And that's what John is saying. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So how can you be both with God and God at the same time? And then emphasized he was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And we know this is Jesus because we hear later on in John verse 14, chapter 1, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we've seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. So Father, Son, and Spirit all involved in creation. We typically say something like creation, the Father, Son, and Spirit is the triune God. They're always acting in perfect harmony together. And we typically would say that when God works, he does it from the Father, through the Son, and by the Spirit, or something similar to that. Okay, it's not to create a hierarchy in some sort of a way that shows that Christ Jesus, the Son of God, is less than the Father, but it's the natural order that within himself of God. So God made everything as Father, Son, and Spirit. He also made man. So if we cruise down here, we can see at the end of Genesis chapter 1, we have the creation of man. God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. We've seen that several times. Image, image, image. Male and female he created them. So male and female both created in the image of God. And from this we derive the human dignity and value and worth, regardless of the fall, because this image bearing is repeated after the fall. And it's very clear that both male and female have this equal worth and dignity before God. Doesn't mean they don't have distinctions and different orders. So, for instance, when it talks about the leaving and cleaving of parents, leaving parents and cleaving together in marriage, we talk about different ways in the New Testament of submission. So both men and women in the church submit to each other, but husband and wife submit to one another in different ways, with the male headship being one of the key ones. And anyway, a lot of people disagree with that. You can explore that more and argue about that more if you like. But key thing here is God made man and woman, mankind. So when we say man, we tend to mean mankind. And there's an important headship issue going on here, because later on in the New Testament as well, we see that we are all sinners under Adam. Adam and Eve were the first two people created. Adam first, and then Eve from his rib, from his side. But we're all under Adam. When Adam sinned, and notice that Adam gets the blame even though it was Eve, but Adam did do wrong things by eating also. But Eve was the one who was deceived. Adam went along with it. Under Adam, we're all considered to be children of Adam and Eve, but we're considered sinners under Adam. Romans chapter 5 talks about that. And then we can be under Christ instead at a later time. See, it's really important that we understand Adam as a real historical being, and don't try and say he was a symbol or something like that. But again, more detail for another time. For now, though, we can see that God made man, and he gave a what we call a creation mandate or a commission to mankind. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it." So have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves. And God said, "I've given you every plant yielding seed and every tree with seed its fruit. You shall have them for food." So God he gave them a command to have dominion. He gave them the food, which is the provision to do that. And he also gave food for the animals. God saw everything he made. Behold, it was very good. There was evening, there was morning, the sixth day. That's the last day of creation. And then God rested on the seventh when he had finished everything. Notice it's not, yep. I was going to get into a sidetrack on creation not being complete, not being quite good enough without the woman being created. But you see that in Genesis chapter 2. That's for another thing. Okay, so I've already spilled over a bit into law. We know that God made the conscience as well. Romans chapter 1 gets into that. Was it 2? Near the end of chapter 1, beginning of chapter 2. But this creation mandate is a specific law, giving God giving a task for mankind to fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over it. We would loosely understand that as being what do you call it? An agreement, a command to fill the earth with the garden, because God planted the garden in one place, but Adam and Eve's job was to take that garden to fill the whole earth. And the garden was God's temple. That's where God met with man. You can see in the temple imagery as you read through the construction of the temple in the Old Testament that there was a lot of garden imagery. And that's another, again, big topic to consider. But there was this idea, this covenant of works, this thing that Adam and Eve had to do. They had to work in order to complete a task, and at the completion of that task, they would have entered into glory. And that task was to spread the garden over the whole earth, was to protect it from evil. And unfortunately they didn't. They listened to the serpent, and rather than casting the serpent out, and they put a curse on all creation. Now, before that curse, though, everything was good, and God makes good things, and God does good things, and God is good. God is not evil. So the goodness of all creation is important to testify. Everything that God has made and has given us, and all his provision is good. There's also the question of angels. Where do they appear in creation? Well, we know by the end of the creation week, God finished everything. He'd finished creating everything. And this would also include the idea of angels. We don't know for sure because it's not stated, but it seems fair to assume that when God created the heavens and the earth, that's a sort of a statement to include everything. Remember, God doesn't actually need a dwelling place like we do. So heaven hasn't always existed. In that sense, heavens and the earth are both created. There's not just the sky and the land. This is a formula that sort of means everything. Okay, which would include angels. So in the beginning, God created everything, including angels. That's probably, it's not something to land on so hard and fast that you would divide over it, but it seems pretty clear that angels were created at the beginning, or over the 6 days of creation as well, but they don't appear necessarily directly in here. But in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, Father, Son, and Spirit, all involved in that creation, and then and man was created. And God gave man law with his conscience and his heart, and he gave him a mandate from creation to fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion over it. He provided all that man would need to do that, and involved in that, or as another way of framing that, is this covenant, this agreement from God that man would work and would complete that work at some point, or complete a probation period, and would enter into glory. We see that a little bit more in Hosea, where the covenant is specifically mentioned that Adam broke. And what covenant would it be except a covenant of works? That's, you'd have to look into that more. And you can disagree with me on that. That's not a essential thing to believe. But it seems that God had commanded Adam to fulfill this anyway. And everything that God made was good, including that covenant of works, interestingly enough. But now, after the fall, we can't work to earn our salvation because all of our works are tainted. And we need the covenant of grace, the grace that comes through Jesus Christ. And Him, Jesus, completing this covenant of works on our behalf, and showing that it's in a spiritual kind of sense. And we now have the Great Commission: go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature, making disciples of all nations, baptizing them. That is our, instead of the creation mandate, we have now a mandate to bring the gospel to the whole earth, so that people would be saved and become a living temple. So no longer a garden temple that we have to take into the whole earth. It is a living temple that we take into the whole earth of believers, made up of believers as the building blocks, with Jesus as the cornerstone. You can read more about that in Ephesians chapter 2, in the latter part of the chapter. All right, that's pretty exciting. The sad thing, of course, is the fall that brought a curse on all creation, but that was also part of God's plan to show His glory in judgment and salvation. And we look forward to Jesus returning as well. So creation's all tied up with God's plan of redemption and His purpose to glorify Himself. And He graciously shares that glory with us, that we can see and be something like Him as we are renewed in the image of Christ. Not just the image of God that's fallen, but we're renewed in the image of Christ and later things. So creation has all of these flow-on effects. All right, we'll wrap it up there. Hopefully this has been useful for you in understanding creation a bit more. If it has, please do share. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel to get updates through your YouTube feed, or just check back regularly on the website at the Bible Lounge. All right, God bless. Cheers.